last week, in the early part of the week, PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, cut off the electricity of 1 million customers from the Silicon Valley until the hills of the Sierras in California. And the reason they cut the electricity off of 1 million customers was for fear of wildfires. Last year, they had one of the greatest natural disasters in the state of California during that year. Now get this, they had 8,527 fires in California last year. Over 2 million acres were destroyed, not to mention all the houses and buildings, etc. And I'm sure you saw that on the news. And so with that kind of occurrence last year, they're trying to prevent it this year. So the weather forecast said that the latter part of the week there was going to be high winds and low humidity. So to prevent another wildfire, they decided to cut the electricity off of 1 million customers. I understand that. But then on the other side of the coin is, I like my electricity. You like your electricity. And there was a lot of controversy thinking that's very premature to cut the electricity off 1 million customers. And there was a lot of complaining. Well, sure enough, on Thursday, the high winds knocked down a power pole and a transformer sparked and wildfire started. Right now, I checked this morning, at least 7,500 acres have been destroyed, and they had to evacuate 100,000 people from that area. So I understand that. You know, the fires that they have in California is pale in comparison or the fire in what they had in the Smokies and Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg last year is pale in comparison to what they have in California. But it's just the culprit in all that is the wind. When you're talking about 50 and 60 mile an hour wind, and you think the fire is out, but then those little glowing embers, and it takes just a little spark, and the wind grabs hold of it, and then you've got a full flame going. Now, from history, Christianity has been trying to be stopped time and time again. We have it in the book of Acts, in which Saul was trying to, when he's on the road to Damascus, he was on the process of trying to eradicate this thing called Christianity. And all throughout history, people have tried to stop it because of all the suffering, because of all the persecution, from all of the legalities of trying to make Christianity illegal. They have tried to stop Christianity. But yet, even though there are efforts to stop Christianity and the cause of Christ, the winds of the Spirit begin to blow. And as the winds of the Spirit begin to blow, they blow over those embers. And those embers catch a blaze and catch a fire, and the dream comes alive, and Christianity is refueled and rekindled again, time and time again. And the story we're going to read this morning, it's going to look like the dream has died. There was a promise given to Abraham that he was going to be the seed for many generations thereafter, for a group of people. And it looks like in this story that the dream is dead. Let's read it. It is in Genesis, the 37th chapter, beginning at verse 12. His brothers. Now, we're doing a series on the life of Joseph, and his is Joseph. This is Joseph's brothers. Had gone to the pasture their father's flocks in Shechem. Israel. Now, let me stop there and talk about Israel. Israel is Jacob. If you remember back in the 32nd chapter of Genesis, Jacob had an experience with an angel of the Lord. In fact, he wrestled with him. And during that process, there was a conversation in which they were going to change his name. Jacob kept asking this angel, "What's your name?" And then the angel never does respond, but he tells, "I'm going to change your name." Now we have names, and they're just labels for us, okay? Larry, Debbie, Tim, Tony, whatever. But in that day and time, a name is a reflection of their character. And Jacob means trickster, deceiver, supplanter. But God changed his name to Israel, which means God prevails. So that's what it's saying here. It's more than just a name. It's a characteristic and a reflection of their character. So God changes his name to Israel. So that's what that means. So Israel is Jacob. That's his daddy. So Israel said to Joseph, "Your brothers, you know, are pasturing the flocks at Shechem. Get ready. I'm sending you to them." He says, "I'm ready," Joseph replied. Then Israel said to him, "Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are doing, and bring word back to me." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now, what's the first thing that you notice in those verses? Well, who's staying home and who's doing the work? The brothers are out in the fields. They're doing the work. Joseph is back home with his daddy, lounging around, not doing anything. And you remember, Joseph is the favored child. He's the pampered child. He's the spoiled brat, if you will. And Joseph, being the favored brother, he always ratted, snitched on his brothers, always told on them. And so I don't know if Jacob is concerned whether the brothers are doing their part of the work or they're doing what they should be doing, but he's got Joseph. He's just going to send Joseph to go and to check on and see if they're actually doing the work. Now, we're not talking about a small hike across the pasture. We're not talking about just a short trip down the road. From Hebron to Shechem is 50 miles. So you're talking about a pretty good hike. You're talking about probably a 30-hour hike that he's going to be making. And looks like, he responds, he says, "I'm ready. I'm ready to go." I guess he's bored around the house, but he's ready to go. Now, I want you to understand, at this point in time in Joseph's life, life is good. I mean, he's the favored child. He gets anything he wants. He is treated far better than his brothers. He gets to stay at home. He doesn't have to go out and the field to work. He has this coat of many colors, and which makes him stand out because it's a special coat tailored to him. His brothers have just a plain old coat. He's got a colored coat, which means he doesn't have to don't get the coat dirty, because he doesn't have to work. So life is good. And then he has these dreams. He has these dreams in which his brothers are going to bow down to him. And he has the gall and audacity. Some dreams you need to keep to yourself. But he tells his brothers about this, that's going to happen. And so in that day and time when you have a dream, it's like God says. Now, in our culture, dreams, they just don't have a lot of gravity. But in that day and time, dreams do. It's almost like God says this. I experienced it in Dakar Synagogue when we did a mission trip over there. I had 2 or 3 Christians tell me that God revealed himself through dreams. So dreams have meaning. So, and especially but from Joseph's perspective, life is good. Okay. So let's go to verse 15. A man found him there wandering in the field and asked him, "What are you looking for?" "I'm looking for my brothers," Joseph said. "Can you tell me where they're pasturing their flocks?" "They've moved on from here," the man said. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph set out after his brothers and found them at Dothan. Now, here you got 12 more miles down the road from Shechem. Now, the distance here, you're talking about from Puryear to Paducah, something like that. You're walking from Puryear to Paducah. Pretty good walk. It's going to take you more than one day. So, verse 18. They saw him at the distance, and before he had reached them, they plotted to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes that dreamer. Come on, let's kill him. Throw him into the pits, and we can say that the vicious animal ate him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." Now, if you have boys, or you have brothers, they fight. I raised two of them, Matt and Josh, and they fought like cats and dogs. I'll never forget, we were at the parsonage in Kentucky, and while I was going to seminary and also pastoring a church, and I was inside looking out the window and watching them play. But it got into more play, it got into a fight. And so Debbie, she comes in, she said, "You better go out there and stop them." I said, "Nah, they'll work it out." And so I went from window to window watching them fight. And they fought for so long, they got tired. They sat on the front porch on a step and rested. Then they went back at it again. And Debbie said, "You better intervene." I said, "No, not until I see blood." And then Matt picked up a rock. And I ain't got time to go get the ER, get stitches. So I intervene and I stop it. But we did have to go to the ER a few times and get stitches. I mean, it's just because they're just boys fight. That's pale in comparison to what these two dudes are doing. I mean, they're crossing the line. Now, it reminds me of this story. I'm a fan of Lonesome Dove. And I don't know if y'all ever seen the show, but anyway, Jake Spoon gets in with a bunch of outlaws. And they're killing, they're stealing, and going through the territory doing that. And then Woodrow McCall and Augustus McCrae, they are former Texas Rangers, and they're going to take care of themselves. So they catch the outlaws. And Jake, who's one of their friends, they're going to hang him too. And Jake says, "You're not going to hang me, are you, Gus?" And Gus says, "If you run with outlaws, you die with outlaws. Sorry, Jake, you crossed the line." And Jake says, "I didn't know there was a line." These guys don't know where the line is. They're going to kill their brother. Now that's over the top, if you will. Now again, from Joseph's perspective, and he's still far off, and they're still talking about killing him, from his perspective, life is good, but that's not the reality. There is our perspective, and there is the reality. He doesn't know that he's walking into the mouth of a volcano. He doesn't know what he's walking into. And so for him, life is good, but he's a dead man walking as soon as he goes up to his brothers. Verse 21. When Reuben heard this, he tried to save him from them. He said, "Let's not take his life." Reuben also said to them, "Don't shed blood. Throw him into this pit into the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him," intending to rescue him from their hands and return him to his father. When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped off his robe, the robe of many colors that he had on, then took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. So Joseph has received all of a sudden a rude awakening. His world, his perspective has made a 180-degree turn. Now you've heard the expression rags to riches. This is reverse, riches to rags. All of a sudden. And his reality is totally changed. Now he doesn't even realize that Reuben has saved his life. And so he doesn't know that they were planning to carry it a step further and to kill him. Right now he's just in a pit, thrown in the pit. Now, can you imagine what Joseph is thinking? And he's in the pit. And they stripped him of his robe, throw him in the pit. And I just imagine what Joseph is thinking. Hey guys, a joke's a joke. Come on, let me out. Daddy's going to be real mad about this. I'm going to tell Daddy about this. And the longer he stays, the more he whines, maybe cries. And what does his brothers do? Men do what they normally do when they don't know what to do. They eat. They have a picnic. Verse 25. Then they sat down to eat a meal. They looked up, and there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were carrying aromatic gum, balsam, and resin going down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What do we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And they agreed. When the Mennonite traders passed by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brother and said, "The boy's gone. What am I going to do?" So they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a young goat, and dipped the robe in its blood. They sent the robe of many colors to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it. Is it your son's robe or not?" His father recognized it. "It is my son's robe," he said. "A vicious animal has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth around his waist, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will go down to Sheol to my son mourning." And his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Mennonites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. So by this time, Joseph realizes it's not a joke. His brothers are not pulling a trick on him. They're not messing with him. All the anger and the jealousy that had been building up with his brothers has come to just an explosion of action and vicious activity of selling their brother to the Ishmaelites. And imagine Joseph is thinking, where's God in all this? I had dreams. I had a dream where my brothers were going to bow down to me, and here I am, a slave. Where is God in all this? From riches to rags. And you remember, when this happens, Joseph is only 17 years old. He's a kid. And he's grieving, and he's depressed, and probably homesick. And life has not turned out well. He had it good, and just in a blink of an eye, things have changed. He is a slave now. Now, we need to deal with this from the perspective of the sovereignty of God. Now, I'm going to carry you all the way from chapter 37 to chapter 50, because things work out if you've read the story of Joseph. And there's a verse in chapter 50 in which the brothers Joseph gets to a point of position in Egypt. And so he has a powerful position, and his brothers come, and they're fearful for revenge. And Joseph tells them this: You intended this for evil, but God intended it for good. Now hang with me here, okay? Think about that a minute. Did God orchestrate what his brothers did to him? Was it in God's plan that his brothers sell him into slavery? Where is God in all this? Now, we believe in the sovereignty of God. God is in control. And we also believe in the free will of man. And we believe in the sovereignty of God and the free will of man. Was it in the sovereignty of God and God's will that he planned and orchestrated all this evil? Well, that doesn't sound right. Is it irreconcilable, the sovereignty of God and the free will of man? God would not plan evil, would he? That doesn't sound like God. Let me explain it like this. A.W. Tozer wrote a book called Knowledge of the Holy, and he uses this illustration. It makes more sense to me than anything that I know of. Let's imagine an ocean liner. A huge ocean liner is leaving New York, and it's going to sail or go to Liverpool. Its destination is Liverpool. It's already been planned. It left the dock from New York, destination Liverpool. It is loaded with passengers. 6,000, if you will, passengers on this ocean liner. On this ocean liner, these people have the freedom to do what they want to do. They can read, they can talk, they can eat, they can sleep, smoke, chew, do anything they want to do. They have the freedom, if you will, to do what they want to do on the ocean liner. But the ocean liner is still going to Liverpool. No matter what they do, it's going to Liverpool. There on the ocean liner, you and I have the free will to do what we want to do. But there is a destination that we're heading for. People out of the will of God does not change the will of God. If you're with me? What we do will not change the will of God. And the will of God is all over this. There is a plan. There's an intervention of God. We will not change that plan. Now, I know you probably watch CNN, CBS, NBC, all those channels. We watch the boob tube, got the news. And we walk around wringing our hands thinking, oh gosh, the Democrats get in control. The Democrats impeach Trump. If the Supreme Court doesn't make their decisions, the opioid epidemic, the stock market's going up and down, the Kurds are going to be ethnic cleansing in Turkey and Syria, and we walk away. The world's going to hell in a handbasket. God is still in control, people. I don't care how bad it gets. God is still on his throne, and God's will prevail. And the winds of his spirit is going to blow across. And Christianity and the spirit's going to catch on fire, and it's going to come ablaze again. But the question is, for you and I, Will he find us faithful? Will a little church on Highway 641 North, going toward Kentucky, in a little town called Puryear, will they be found faithful? Will